What if I told you that work-life balance was never the solution? It's a placeholder for something that we don't really truly understand and put into practice. My name's Cass. I'm the Chaos Whisperer, and each week I'm breaking down challenges with people who are navigating life in real time. This is not about motivation. It's about diagnosis. Because once you name the chaos around you, you can change how you move. If you've been feeling the weight of the world too heavy lately, you're not off. You're simply operating without clarity. And most importantly, you're not alone. I'm right there with you. One of the most dangerous things for high performers to hear is they simply need better boundaries, as if the issue is just a personal discipline problem or the problem is just being able to say no and sticking to it. I think a lot of people, especially women who are caregivers or people who are highly dependable leaders, are exhausted not because they're weak or bad at boundaries. We're exhausted because everyone around us has adapted to our overfunctioning. We've become the person who's most reliable, who has the emotional infrastructure. We're the operational backup plan. We're the unofficial project manager, the fixer, the peacekeeper, you name it, we're owning it and wearing it. Eventually, this exhaustion becomes normalized because our competence makes us invisible. And today's conversation is about that invisible labor. Because burnout doesn't come from doing too much. Sometimes it comes from being the system that holds everything together. Today, I'm joined by an amazing guest, Kelly, Coach Kelly, as we're going to call her today. How did we meet? I can't even recall exactly how. I think it's one of those things you've always been in my
Mhm.
orbit,
Yeah.
but we met in person and immediately I was like, "Oh, she's my people." Kelly is a coach, a strategist, and all around just a great person to have in your corner. She is one of the best cheerleaders for people who are high performing and who also want to be able to create a life that works for them rather a life that they're just working for. So I'm so glad to be here with you, Kelly. Is there anything that our audience needs to know about you before we get into some questions and conversation?
No, I am an only child, which my husband likes to remind me. That's why I always have to cut in line. If there's a pizza, for example, I have to have the first piece. So it's like I have only child syndrome, which I've been working on for 56 years and still working on.
As someone who's raising an only child, especially an only girl child,
Yeah.
I welcome it because the world will try to remove that out of you. And we can share, we can be amenable, but at the same time, go first, girl. I'm here for it. So tell me, why do you think, in your experience, that high performers struggle so much with boundaries?
Think there's a bit of the perfection. I always say we were raised, but to be perfect, to always show up as your best version of yourself, no matter what that looked like. And I was always trying to be perfect. If I didn't get an A, or if I didn't, look as put together as I should have, or if I stumbled when I spoke, and then I realized like nobody knows what I was going to say. Nobody knew what I was going to do. Only I knew that. So I was holding myself to this like impossible standard. And I'm not saying I lowered the standard. I just like it was okay to make a mistake, or it was okay not to be perfect because I learned something. And I found that my relationships and the people around me responded to I messed up, or hey, here's what I learned. Here's what I showed up and I cried today, and that's it happened, and that was an emotion. It's like we have to just acknowledge that we're human, and as the Human League says, we're born to make mistakes, and that we learn. And then I always go through the mantra of I'm the only me I'm going to be, and I'm not going to change who I am because it takes a lot to change who I am present and show up as. And it's easier just to be me and say I'm real and this is who I am.
I agree. The boundary idea is something that's always a moving target. And giving ourselves permission to set boundaries and stick to them. And I appreciate when people are saying like we have to learn how to set boundaries, right? But I always like the phrase, especially in interpersonal relationships, boundaries are the space by which I can love you and me at the same time. And in leadership, it's boundaries are the space where you can do your role and I can do my role at the same time. And really understanding that. But I think those of us who want it done right, and I want to come back to that idea of perfectionism. It's like we want it to be done in a certain way, but realizing that way isn't the only way is kind of hard sometimes. So, what are some ways that you've let go of that in your life? The idea of not just being perfect, but my way is the best and only way, especially being an only child, like you said at the beginning.
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. And I think so many of us think we have a boundary and we have to stick to that boundary. And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes we say, you know what, I always go by the D's: do it, defer it, delete it, delegate it. What are the things that, and it
Mhm.
might be, this is going to take me 2 minutes to do it. It might take me 15 minutes to explain it or delegate it. And is it something that needs to be delegated? I always look at it and say, what of this do I have to do? What can be delayed? What can be deferred? How many times do we say yes to people and make commitments, not only at work, but in our personal lives? We have someone saying, hey, I want to get together. Oh, yeah, I want to get together because it's exciting. And then I'm like, then you look at our calendar, I'm like, this is not possible.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be stressed if I meet you. Just because you say yes to something doesn't mean that you can't go back and say, I just looked at I looked at my calendar and it's just not possible for me to meet this week. When's your next opening that we can get together? And it's like, just because we said yes or, broke a boundary when we said we weren't going to overcommit or weren't going to put too much on our calendar, there's always an opportunity to go back and recalibrate or reswizzle what we have on our plates.
I think that's the key thing, making sure that what you're saying yes to is actually a yes. Because at the end of the day, that coffee that you go to that you committed to, are you going to be on your phone half the time? Are you really going to be able to build
Yeah.
connection because you're distracted? Or are you going to have to cut it short because you've got this, that, and the other going on? We work in such a space where we're overscheduled. There's just
Mhm.
too many things to get done in the day. But what would you say to someone? Because I used to feel really bad. Like, honestly, I would feel so bad. I'd be like, "Oh my gosh," and like you said, "I'm so excited. Yes, absolutely. Let's get together. I can't wait. Let's have coffee on Saturday." And then, Friday comes and you're like, "Ugh, I'm just tired," or, "But I said I would do this thing and now I feel bad, and what are they gonna think of me?" And all these other kinds of like, what do you ever experience that? Or
Yes.
like
I already am like 4 chapters ahead. I'm like already I've disappointed them. Now
yeah.
they're not gonna reach out to me in the future. And
Mhm.
you've created this whole scenario in your head that hasn't even happened. And quite possibly, I'd say 95% of the chance of it happening is slim. And
Yeah.
then you actually sometimes go back to the person and said, you know what, I've had a really busy, hectic week, and I really want to give you my undivided attention and have the time to be with you and be present. And I don't feel that I would in the right frame of mind to do that. Would you be open to rescheduling? And then most of the time, I will say 9 out of 10, I get, my gosh, I'm so glad that you said that because I also
Me?
had yeah.
I think we're more alike than we are separate. And
Mhm.
sometimes the brave thing is to just say the hard part out loud
Yeah.
and saying it to people and being like, "Hey, I may have overscheduled myself. Like, I
Yeah.
really need to do ABC, XYZ." But what about the person who is receiving that cancellation? What can that person do? Because I have had people who are like, ugh, and like irritated by the fact that I have a full life. Especially and this is no tea, no shade against anybody who doesn't have children or who's never not in a relationship or whatever that looks like, but sometimes it's like, "No, my kid has a birthday party on Saturday that I forgot about, and I gotta run and get a gift. I gotta do this. I gotta," and by the time I do all of that, no, I'm not gonna be able to make it across town to meet you. To the receiver of that cancellation, like, what would you
I
say?
think when you put it in a way that you can, like I said, like I really want to be present with you, and I have all these things. I'm going to have to cut our time short, which I don't want to do. I really want to spend the full time with you. When you put it in a different perspective, that you want to be present with them, you want to give them your attention, and this is, right now the way my day has unfolded, it's just not going to be possible. And when you just say that, and then you pause, you don't
Yeah.
keep talking. A lot of times we keep talking and then we start making it maybe not so great. And we start interpreting or, inserting things. And I always say, if you take that pause and
Mhm.
then count to 5 and then let them respond, and they might be like, I totally understand. And if they don't, I mean, I'd say 9 out of 10, they're going to be fine with it. And then sometimes you might have to take a look and say, is this person someone I really want to be
Mm,
involved with? Or is it someone who is supportive and understanding? And I'm going to reschedule it.
yeah. Do you think guys have that same problem and thought process?
I will tell you, my husband says we say it like it is. He just basically they're very direct and very blunt. I think he's like, "I know that if I do this, my friend, whoever I was gonna meet, he'll be fine the next time, and it's we could just get past it." He's like, "We just" he goes he played hockey, he's like, "We would get in a fight, and then 2 hours later, we'd be drinking a beer together." So I'm like, "I just don't get that because feelings, we're over analyzing it in our head, and we're turning it into this, like, this saga." And he's like, we just get past it. We don't hold grudges."
Because I look at male leaders who, like you said, say it like it is, they move on with their day, they don't overfunction. Why are women so frequently conditioned for this emotional overfunctioning scenario of saying yes to everything and having limited boundaries?
I mean, it could be the caregiver in us. It could be many different things. It could be our emotional intelligence. I, I was functioning in a place where I was caring for my aging mother and my family, my son, and my full time job. And I was not. Everyone was a priority over me. I never prioritized myself. And my husband would be like, "If I'm tired, I'm just going to go and not do any of those extra things." And I'd be worried about like if my mom hadn't seen me, it's been 3 days since I saw her. I have to go. And he's like, "She can call you if she needs you. She's
Uh-huh.
care of." And I'm like, I'm always thinking about, well, is she going to be wondering where I am? Or is she, I'm putting too much like what ifs versus this is
Yeah.
what's really happening.
Culturally, we have these expectations and then we take them on, and it's this cycle. And we could name it as far as, patriarchy, sexism, misogyny, all these things. And that's why I often say the most revolutionary thing for women to do is to start saying no to those expectations and asking yourself, what is the worst case scenario that you're thinking about in your head? And is that true, or is that something that you're making up in order to stay in that cycle of being needed and being the only one? I do think there's also something of, other people can underfunction because we overfunction. So you're actually doing them a disservice because they're not having to show up in these ways because you're doing everything for everyone. No one wins when there's one person holding up the sky, really. And so, how can we not internalize that and stop being rewarded for these unsustainable dynamics and expectations in both sides of the relationship, you know?
I think there's a couple, I'm going to give you a personal example and then a professional example. Was working with a client and we were talking through all these additional things that she was saying yes to, or like she was always the fixer. Everyone would come to her and that felt good to her. And
Mhm.
I said, it's good. It feels good to be needed. However, there is a price that comes with that. When everyone comes to you for answers, when everyone comes to you for help or to save the things, and what happens with your work or your priorities, they get pushed down. And I said, I always say other people's poor planning doesn't constitute an emergency on your part. And how many times do you let others' emergencies take over your day? And what I say is, are you using your do not disturb? Are you, blocking out that thinking time? Are you giving away your prime time for work to others, to email, to responding, or to prioritizing others before you? And when you do that, your work might be late. Your work might not be as good as it could be. And
Mhm.
just take a moment and say, what would your best friend say to you? What would
Mm.
the people that are cheering you on or that are in your corner, what would they say? Like you're having to over function because you're choosing. Again, it's a choice. You're choosing to let others railroad your day.
Mhm.
So when
Mhm.
I say that you have a choice, you can say when someone comes to you, do you have a minute? That takes, again, you're now taking your attention and moving it somewhere else, which it's going to take you 15 minutes to go back to what you were doing. And I say if you're on do not disturb or you're in your high strategy work or your high value work, do not respond. Do not respond. You can even be preemptive and say, I'm working on something for the next 3 hours and I will be unavailable. You can be proactive with that. What does that
Yeah.
cost you? Plan for that. And then I forgot. They're working on this. I will reach out to them later. Guess what? Then they might be like their emergency might be pushed on to somebody else, or maybe they took it on. So
Yeah.
many times we come in and save, and I say just it's like that defer. Can I call you back this afternoon? Just that's another thing you can do. Defer it. Or
Yeah.
someone says, "Can you help me with this?" I'm saying, I need to look at my own priorities first and let me get back to you in 24 hours.
There's also a psychological thing of wanting to be the person that people come to
Mhm.
and the dependability marker, the ability to really just be needed,
Mhm.
right? And it's good. It fuels our ego,
Yeah.
you know?
Your endorphin is like that.
Most of us really want to do good work. We want to be, acknowledged and praised and all these things. And psychologically, that's a great thing. But also it can be detrimental if your only source of accolades comes from other people relying on you. What do you see with your clients psychologically when they come to you?
I see burnout. I see people who are just I can't continue on this way. They're either at functioning, they're at a burnout level right now, or they're heading for a burnout, or they're saying I need to make a choice or make a change. And it could be within the organization, it could be outside of the organization, it could be just creating boundaries or creating a better integration. I was never a balance, but a better integration with their work life. And it's helping people say it's okay, to log off at 5:30 or it's okay not to sit there and until 10 o'clock at night, or it's okay to go and do something for you. And I always tell people, like, look at your calendars. What does your calendar look like? Is it all meetings? Do you have no time to get your work done? Are you constantly getting interrupted? Are you giving away your most productive time? And do you have time for yourself in there? Whether it's, fueling a healthy meal at lunch, walking, taking a walk with your daughter or your dog or your spouse or your partner, your best friend. Is there time for you to fuel what brings you joy? And when you have an imbalance in your calendar, you can feel it. And I always say, if you had a great day, go back and look at your calendar. What made it a great day?
Yeah, that's such good advice of being able to look back and say, "Hey, this I feel good at the end of this day. What made this day different than last week when I didn't
Mhm.
feel good?" And being able to have that healthy delegation and really tune into this is what healthy looks like for me.
Yeah.
And this is what unhealthy looks like for me. And not every day is going to be the best day of your life, but we want more good days than we want not. So being able to like really look like that. And again, look at the data that comes from your own life rather than, relying on this is what I should do. Because we've got social media, you've got parents and friends and all these people telling you this is what good could look like for you or should look like for you, but they don't know your life. They don't know really exactly what you've got going on and how to make those operational decisions and make them clear. What suggestions would you have for people trying to build that clarity? For me, mine was finding a hobby. I realized I was 40-something years old and I had no hobbies. I had nothing that I did outside of just wanting to like, I always wanted to read, but I never actually read a book. Or what are your go-to kind of things? Like, how do you help people with that?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm talking, thinking about a client I had, and I said, "What do you do for fun?" She said, "I work." And I said,
Ooh,
I'm like, "Okay, what do you do when you're not working?" And she's like, "Well, I go on vacation because that's the only time I get to relax." And I said, "So you don't relax on the weekend? You don't?" And I said, "Well, if I was doing that. If you could wave a magic wand, if money and time were no object, what would you do that would bring you joy?" And she's like, "I would work. I would go volunteer at a pet shelter or do something with dogs. I love dogs." I said, "That's amazing." I said, "What's one thing you could do this week to see if there's any places that are taking volunteers?" And it's
yeah,
just like, what's one action? It doesn't have to be I have to go and sign up, but it's just I'm going to make a call. I'm going to make a call this week to the SPCA. I'm going to make a call to, a second chance shelter, and I'm going to do that. Okay, great. Let's put that on the to-do list. It's not You don't have to do 10 things or 10 steps, but
yeah.
it's just one small action that you feel like you're moving forward versus in that spiral or that hamster wheel that you can't get off.
Yeah. I think that's so good. A friend of mine, she volunteers with a homeless shelter and it's not a volunteer like you go and hand out food. Like they go and they have like a setup and people who are unhoused come to this like setup. It's like kind of almost like a farmer's market for folks who are unhoused. And so she started just going and like handing out what they had. And, she's like, oh, this month I was in charge of handing out like oranges and water bottles, right? And so she was like doing that. And then she realized, oh, I used to make soap. And so she was like, oh, I can make soap. So she makes like 2 or 3 dozen bars of soap, and then that's part of her, and so now it's something that she does, like, continuously through the month, and then once a month, she goes and she has all this soap to just, like, give out. And I'm just like, this is such a great way to not only build in community, something that you like to do with your hands and be creative, but it's also something that, like, just started of all I had to do at the beginning was show up, you
Yeah.
know? And I think just being able to, like, have that little thing to, like, tap into your community is so beautiful. I hope your client was able to find a shelter to go, because listen, that is not my ministry. I'm not gonna go pet dogs for fun. Yeah, that's not my thing, but, like, I love that people are able to do that, and there's so many things in our communities that we can do.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's just, it's like, I always say, what's one thing, like for me, when I left the corporate world, I said, I really want to give back and do more things with the WIT network. And that's why I volunteered over here with Christine. And that's one of the things that I've taken on, or it's choosing where I want to go and have an impact. Hey, I'll host some mentoring circles. I know you hosted a mentoring circle for the WIT network. It's really about, what does your heart sing to you? What is the thing that keeps coming up, or you keep, it's that voice that if you give yourself the time in this space, it comes up and you start to go, oh, I should really listen to that. What's it telling me to do? And
Yeah.
finding that piece where you feel that you've, given back, or you might have a calling to do something completely different. I'm thinking about writing a book. You and I talked about your book that you
Mhm.
wrote. And I'm just, it's kind of been in the back of my mind. And I'm going to start working on that this summer. So, and I'm just going to write every Sunday. So I'm not making, I'm not saying I don't know when the book is going to get written, but I'm going to say I'm just going to write for an hour every Sunday. And that's where I'm going to start, or starting
Yeah.
this week.
When we're looking for things that can be sustainable within our lives and in our leadership, it's just finding one little thing and starting with that. Because it's more about building a consistency muscle rather than I'm gonna boil the ocean and do everything at the same time, and just reminding ourselves that a little bit does really truly go a long way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you make that commitment to yourself and then you start building and you say, oh, you know what, an hour, actually, I can give 2 hours, or maybe
Mhm.
this week I could do 4 hours. I don't know what that looks like, but it's starting with something, and you might say, I am able to give more, or I am able to do this. And
Yeah.
I love the Friends episode where you probably know it. They're carrying a mattress up the stairs and Ross keeps saying, pivot, pivot. Yes. I always say it's you go with a plan, and then most likely you're gonna have to pivot, and
Mhm.
just be ready for the pivot.
Yeah, be ready for the pivot is such a great way of putting that. So, what are your hobbies? What do you d we know you're writing a book. We got that little bit of tidbit of information, but, like, what do you like doing for fun there?
I love to walk with my dog, and I like to kayak, and I'm like an amateur birder.
Okay, I love listen, there was a show is like a trivia show, and that was one of the categories. I knew nothing about these birds. I was like, but the people who were on it, they were like they were getting into it. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a new hobby. We have bald eagles and osprey at our summer place, and the one day, it must have been the eagles and the osprey had their babies, and they were all like just fishing like crazy, and
Oh
it
my
was just like
gosh.
one eagle after another, and we were just like, oh my gosh, it's just magnificent. And it's something that will never happen again, but to be present in that moment and to watch this miracle of nature is a
Yeah.
pretty cool thing.
Yeah. So I know there's gonna be someone who's listening who's like, that all sounds great, but I can't do that." What would your advice be to them?
I think if you've got something that's been calling to you, or you've been thinking about it, there's time. You can always make time for things. Most of us don't use our time off. We don't, at the end of the year, we don't take the time off that we earned, and that's a shame because you never get that back. And I have it's not a morbid like thing to think about, but we know the year we're born. We have no idea the year we're going to leave this earth, and all we have is the dash between those years. And that dash could be long, that dash could be shorter than others. And I always say to people, how do you want to spend your dash? And what would you be disappointed if you didn't get to do? And you could have a bucket list. It doesn't have to be this enormous thing. It might be like, I was talking to a dear friend last summer, and she said her and her sister, she's like, her sister was going to the Cape, and she's like, I just can't do it. And she ended up going. And I said, how was it? She's like, one night we drank wine and we were dancing by a fire like witches. And she said, and we had so much fun. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I got that experience with my sister. And if I would have said no because I was too busy, I would not have experienced it. So I always say, I know there's a cost sometimes of doing something, but what's the cost if you don't?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring this up, the dash in between, because my father passed away about 5 years ago, and one of the things that it really real because it was completely unexpected, and he was ill, but not, like, so ill where we were expecting him to not be with us any longer, and he was working remote, and he had got up and logged into his computer and then had a heart attack, and I just remember being like, "I don't want that. I don't want the last thing I do." And now he was very loved, he traveled a lot, he's a big basketball fan, so he would always go to the NCAA tournaments and all these, that was a big part of his life. He really did live to the fullest, especially in the last, like, 5 to 6 years of his
Mhm.
life. But I remember I don't want to, I was going through his things and his computer was, like, still on. And it's just one of those, like, the last thing he did was make coffee to sit down and go to work. And I just, I want that to be something that, like, is great, and I want work to be a part of my life, but I won't don't want it to be the last thing that I, spend my time doing. I had another colleague a few years ago who she passed away when she, like, took a nap, like, in the middle of her day, you know? I think, work is important, but at the end of the at the end of everything, right? When we, are remembered by people who love us, do we want them to just say, "Oh, they worked really hard?" I don't think so. I think they wanna, like, she was an expert birder, she knew how to make soap, she knew how my hobby, I took up paint by numbers,
Oh,
I love painting, like, I love that of being able to, like, be creative.
mhm.
There's so much more to our human experience than the work that we do, and we have to take time to figure out and find it while we have the time and while we have the ability because, it's that's what the boundaries are for. The boundaries are for being able to find not your no's, but find your yeses, find the things that are super important to you.
And I think that's a great segue into if that's the cost of overcommitting. I always say, okay, you can choose to say yes to that, but then you're going to say no to something that's probably more important that has a higher value for you personally.
Yeah.
You can't have it all. So if you say yes to this, you're saying no to something else. So what are you going to say yes to and what are you going to say no to? Or what are you going
Yeah.
to maybe even come back and say, I know I committed to this. However, if things have changed, I'm going to have to delay this or whatever, reswizzle that. Take the trip, when your best friend calls you and wants to stay with you for a month or, or this summer and you're like, oh my gosh, this is something I'll never get again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Uh, Before we started recording, we were talking about my kid, and one of the things this summer that she's really the school year just ended, so what are we gonna do for the next school year, and what does that look like, and what worked and what didn't, being able to have those conversations. She's at an age where she's can make some of those decisions. We call that, like, you're old enough to make 10-year-old decisions, and her really leaning into, "You know what? I was stressed out by these things. I don't wanna do that anymore."
yeah,
And I was like, "Okay, girl." Like, just being able to give that to the next generation, I think is, like, really, really cool because, listen, I was raised by a mom who did say, "No, you can do it all."
mhm.
And now I'm like, "Actually, I don't want to." I probably could, but I don't want to. And being able to say, like, to my kid, "No, you don't have to do that. If this is your priority, let's make this your priority and let's go all in on it. And midway through the year, we can reassess. If you want to change something else, then okay, we'll change it up." Being able to do that, I think
Yeah.
is such a cool thing. And I just hope more women who are in that, 30 to 50 age range just, like, are able to find that for themselves.
I think we should challenge all of the listeners to, say, what are you going to do this summer? How are you going to take this summer for you or spend that time with your kids or
Yeah.
your loved one, your parent, your best friend, your spouse, whoever that special person might be. Make time for summer fun. Make time to laugh and play, whatever that might look like. Run through a sprinkler, go play tennis or pickleball or whatever that might be,
Mhm.
and go on a kayak or look for those birds or make that soap or paint by numbers. I do have a paint by number set that's sitting on the table. for me to do on a rainy day, and I'm looking forward to that. So I think we can challenge everyone is make time for joy and make time for the things you've always wanted to do. It doesn't have to be all today. You can make a sabbatical. You can also look and say, okay, I'm going to do this for a period of time, and I'm going to come back in a quarter and say, does this serve me anymore? What can what should I be doing differently? Like take a library day. The great thing about where we are, it's not scripted, and you can say today, this is where I am and this is where I want to be, and I feel celebrated and I feel like I'm doing the right work and I have a pretty good balance, not all the time, but I'm able to balance more. And then in 3 months from now, you come back and say, wow, things have really changed. What do I need to change? Maybe I need to put up some new boundaries. Maybe I need to, plan for a week of vacation every quarter. I find I'm burning out quicker. What are the things that I need to do differently? The beautiful thing is you can make changes. That's life. And you can choose to do something different. You can choose a different cadence or rhythm with how you work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I always ask, like, what's one part of your life, what's one part of chaos that you're whispering to right now? But before I ask you that, what's one thing that's giving you hope these days,
I
Kelly?
think conversations like this and that people are recognizing that they don't want to continue on in a pattern that's negatively affecting them, or that people are reaching out and saying, I need an accountability partner. I know that this isn't sustainable. I want to choose a different path, but I don't know how to get there. And I don't think we had that as much before, or we just thought we just put our heads down and do it, and this is just what we have to do. And I think the beauty is hopefully that we're showing the next generation that they can do different and they can be different. And it's okay to say, I'm going to take a year sabbatical, or I'm going to choose a different path for the next year and try something different. And then if the next year you want to go back to something corporate, or maybe take a step into a different direction or try something new, that's that's your choice. And that's a gift you can give yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any area of chaos that you're whispering to in your own world right now?
Yes, I'm leaning into some things that I held my first retreat with a dear friend of mine in March, and I after that I said, "Oh, that was a lot of work. I'm never going to do it again." However, we're already planning our next.
Famous words.
Yes, because I really learned a lot, and it's the chaos of doing something that's uncomfortable and something that's a new muscle for me. However, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I know the impact that the people that had on those who attended, and I want to do more of that. So it's a little bit of chaos for me because I'm getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I know that the outcome is just so transformative and truly amazing that I want to do more. So I'm leaning into
Yeah.
the chaos.
It's beautiful. So, one thing I want to say in closing, I think, so many of us have spent so many years confusing our usefulness with our self worth. Eventually, that usefulness becomes essential to our survival and we start to disappear from our own lives. But what's clear is that any kind of sustainable life or leadership cannot coexist without our sustainable humanity. And it's not so much about boundaries becoming stronger and showing that we care less. It's actually a way for us to show that we care more about not just ourselves, but the communities and the people that we serve. And maybe I hope someone who's listening to this is finding and realizing that their care should include themselves. And it's okay to put yourself first. It actually should be the expectation because, as the saying goes, we can't pour from an empty cup. We have to be full in order to give to others.
And as the flight attendant says, put your oxygen mask on first before you help those next to you. So, with that,
Correct.
thank you so much, Cass, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Always. All right, y'all. Well, this has been right there with you. And we'll put all the useful tips of where to find myself and Kelly in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, we would love you to subscribe and share it with someone. If you didn't like it, you can go ahead and keep it to yourself or leave me a comment because I appreciate the engagement. Again, thank you, Kelly, for your time. And I look forward to seeing you in real life real soon.
Thanks, Cass. Same here.
Thank you so much for listening. If this episode gave you language for something you've been carrying, I'm so glad. Remember that clarity is a skill and it's one that you can build, but you got to build it in community. Let's go deeper together inside of the Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. Be sure to turn on your notifications, like, subscribe, share, all the things. Leave me a comment. I really do read every single one of them. If something really stood out to you, I'd love to hear about it. If not, you can keep it to yourself. I appreciate the engagement though. Until next time, remember, stop reacting and start interpreting.